Making ad creative shouldn't take you several months. You have a product, you have a photo, and you need to create a clean flyer you can post or run as an ad. This shouldn't take you a long time to produce. But in real life, it turns into a whole process because you have to resize images, rewrite the copy, you need to hunt down for layouts, wait on a designer, and this whole process makes it very long and very cumbersome. And by the time the creative is ready, the moment has passed. When it comes to running campaigns, it's all about timing. And to layer on top of this is that if you are doing this every week or for multiple products at a time, then this can also become a bottleneck. The hardest part isn't really the marketing, it's producing the visuals consistently. So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you exactly how you can build an AI-powered ad creator or an ad flyer application using n8n and Google Firebase Studio. And I'm going to show you exactly how I built this step by step. In this application, all you have to do is you upload a product image, you add in a few details, and then the system generates a polished marketing flyer automatically. I'm going to show you how I handle the images, how I generate the flyer concept, and how I create the final visual and send it right back to the browser without you having to write thousands of lines of code. By the end of this tutorial, you'd have a complete workflow where you can reuse for product ads, landing pages, or even social media content. Let's get right into it. Before I dig into the tutorial, if you're interested in getting the templates for this workflow, I'm going to leave the link in the comment section below so that you can download it from my school community. All right, let's get started. So this tutorial is going to be in two parts. The first part of this tutorial would be me talking about how I built this inside n8n, the backend. And the next part of the tutorial would be talking about how I built the front end inside Firebase Studio. So this is the high level architecture of this entire tutorial. So the first part is like we have our front end, which you saw sitting in the browser. It sends in request. And once that request hits n8n, through the webhook, you pass it on to do a bit of processing on the image. And then once the image has been fully processed, we pass it back on to an AI agent node that sort of extracts the information we got from our front end, which is really the product name, the brand, and main benefits of the product. And then based on that information, it generates like a flyer concept. And now this flyer concept prompt is what's passed on to our image generation endpoint, which is in this case Gemini. After the image has been generated or the flyer has been generated, we pass it back onto another node to sort of like transform that response we got from Gemini into a binary file, and then we pass that response back to the UI. So let me show you how this is done exactly inside n8n. So inside n8n, like I mentioned, I have a webhook node starting off, and there are two important things I'd like to talk about with the webhook node. So the webhook node is basically receiving the body, which is the product's name, the product benefits, the brand name, target audience, and product image. Now, notice how the product image is being sent, right? So it's combined the base64 string with like the mean type of the image, and that's not what we want. So we'd have to further down in the workflow, we're going to sort of pre-process this. Another thing I want to also mention is that under options here, you can see allowed origins here, right? It has a star. Now the star here is something that you should not do, especially if you are building this for production. Ideally, you want to make this a bit tight. So ideally, you want to have like specific URL that you're expecting to get a response from. And of course, it's really like a browser security rule. So you just want to make sure that you're only getting requests from authorized URLs and all that. And also the other thing you can also do to tighten this is to add in authentication. So you can add in authentication this way as well. Again, just to tighten it a bit, just so only people who have access to this n8n workflow here can access it and not malicious actors. Okay, so now moving on. So this code node I have in here basically is just doing two things. So it's taking this product image here, which contains a base64 string and some other components that we don't need, and it's stripping it off and then generating a binary file for us. So as you can see, this has been stripped off and we have the binary file generated, and you can see it in here. So the next step after this, and I'm using a code node for this, like I mentioned, I'm going to drop the link to download the templates in the comment section below so that you can have access to the code and all that. Now moving on to the next step, I'm sort of reducing the image just because like if you don't reduce the image, what can happen is that you may end up having errors down the lane, especially when you are trying to sort of like access the Gemini endpoint. Workflows in general are very sensitive to like payload sizes. So this step is really really just reducing the image and helping us reduce the likelihood of having like 4 and 3 errors down the lane. And it also would help speed up our inference, because if the image is too large, then it may take a while to generate anything. And this would basically help make the system a lot more reliable as well. So I'm just reducing it. It really depends on like the image size you want. I just kept it as 500 by 500 in here, but maybe you may need something bigger, you may need something smaller. It really depends on what your design is. And in here, I've also like specified a format that I want it to be PNG format, and I put in the quality as well. So the reduce image node is available inside n8n. I think is really good, especially if you are doing a lot of things with image processing and all that. Okay, so now this is the image we have, but the next step is we are moving this back into a base64 string. And the reason why we are doing that is because, like, again, I said we are going to be using Gemini to generate and redesign the flyer, right? And Gemini's inline image input requires a base64 string, so you can't take like a binary file. So after we've optimized the image from the previous step, which is the reduce image step, we are sort of like converting it back to base64, and only at the point where the AI needs it the most, so that we sort of, again, avoid any unnecessary bloat down the line. And we are trying to make this workflow as reliable as possible. Okay, so in terms of the inputs I have here, so I have the binary file here as the input, which is the image, and then I have the destination output file, which is data. The next step is we have the edit fields node. And again, this node is just here to create like a clean, predictable input structure. So from our previous step, so if I should click on show data, if I come into schema, you can see that we have so many things in here that we really don't need. So we are just trying to clean it up and just make sure that we are just passing in the necessary stuff. So we are sort of like separating the JSON, we are putting in the text data into their own field, and this makes it a lot more easier further down the road. In terms of the things we are extracting in the edit fields node here, we are extracting the product name, the main benefits, target audience, brand name, and then the data. And I've also said like include other input fields, because I know that the previous step has like some binary data. We want to pass that in as well. Now, the next step we have here is the AI agents node. So this AI agents node we have in here basically is just here to generate the flyer concept for us. So we are giving it some layout instructions, we are giving it some mood and visual directions. And this is a very important step, because that's where we are actually designing what we want, right? So this prompt to be passed on to the Gemini node to basically generate the flyer image we want. And we are using inputs from our previous step. So we are generating this flyer concept based on the product name, the product type, the brand, the benefits, and all that, and the audience this targets. And we've put in some guardrails, guys. It's very important that anytime you're using the AI agents node, it's very important to put in guardrails, because if you don't put in guardrails, then it would go ahead and do its own thing. So you put in guardrails as well. And once you get access to this template, you'd have access to like the exact prompt and everything. And yeah, one thing I also want you to know is that even though you see like this Gemini model connected to this node, it doesn't necessarily mean that the image generation is not happening here, guys. Image generation is going to be happening in the next step. Yeah, so this AI agent node here is just defining the flyer concept. Now, the next step is where the image generation itself happens. So this is the Gemini generation endpoint I'm using. And basically in here, we are sending in the prompts that we got from the previous step. And we are also passing in like the mean type. And we're also passing in the base64 string. It's very important to add the base64 string in here, just so Gemini can use it as a reference in its image generation. So like, for instance, just like you would go into Gemini and you'd upload an image and you put in a prompt, just think of it like that. You need to have like a reference image, which in this case is the image we uploaded in the front end, and we have to add a prompt for it as well. Yeah, so this is the output you are getting. Again, similar to the other nodes, the Gemini endpoint is giving us so many things that we don't necessarily need. So we want to make sure that in the next step, we are just probably going to just extract just the parts that we need. So we have like a cleanup node in the next step. So let's talk about the cleanup node. So this is the cleanup node we have in here. And in here, I have a code node. And the code node is basically like extracting just the things we need, which in this case is the base64 string, the mean type, and then the caption. So again, this is what the code node is doing. It's basically just acting as like cleaning up. It's just extracting the generated image, the mean type, and also keeps the caption. Like, I've been really placed emphasis on the caption, but if you are trying to post this on social media, then you want to have a caption as well. in here, we are just like trying to normalize the response so that the rest of the flow stays simple. And then now the next step here is we're trying to convert everything to a binary file. Well, I do have this extract fields here, which isn't really necessarily needed, to be honest, like because you can just basically drag the output from the cleanup node here into the next node, which is basically converting it back to binary. And the reason why I'm converting this to binary is because browsers really expect binary images, not like the JSON file or the base64 string. So that's why this is being converted back to binary. And this is what you end up seeing on the front end. The last step is really the webhook node. So inside the webhook node here, I have like the binary file, which I'm sending back. And as you can see, I have the input file field name here as data as well. So yeah, this is really how things work inside n8n on the back end. I do have a similar tutorial going through like this in more detail. So if you want to watch that tutorial as well, I'm going to leave the link to that tutorial in the comment section below so that you can go check it out. But that is how the backend behaves. Now, let me show you how things are done in the front end. The front end, honestly, is quite the easy part of the whole tutorial. So let me show you how things are done in the front end. But before we start with the way things are done in the front end, I want to jump in and talk about why I'm using Google Firebase Studio for this build. So Firebase Studio is great when you want to like prototype quickly, and it helps keep everything in one place. That is like your front end, your environment variable, your Firebase project without spending time on local setup. And the other advantage of Firebase Studio is also like you can basically do everything in a prompt. So you don't need to like basically have to write code yourself, set up rules and all that. You can just use a prompt to build everything. So that's what we are going to be exploring. And so the fact that it makes it easier for me to like spin up the UI, connect to the webhook, and then iterate fast all from the browser makes it very easy for me to use. But that said, Firebase Studio isn't perfect, especially when you start working with images and binary data. It becomes complicated really quickly. And so I'll call these limitations as we go on in Google Firebase Studio. But I'll say that for learning, for prototyping, and also demonstrating how this whole process works or this AI-powered ad creative SaaS application fits together, I think it's really a practical choice to use. In my previous video, I did this using TinyHost as well. So I'm going to continue doing similar videos like this, like how you can turn your workflows into like front end using very easy infrastructure or architecture so that it doesn't really stop you from like getting started with like vibe coding or building applications, especially if you've been developing n8n workflows for a while now. A lot of people do ask me like, how do I translate this workflow into something usable that people can use? So I think, in my opinion, this is a good way to do that, especially if you are trying to build MVP, you want to try it out and everything. Like this is really a good way for you to really practice something, put it out in the market, see if people like it, and then if people like it, then you can actually go full scale on it as well. The good thing about Firebase Studio as well is that you can add in authentication and all those things a lot more easier that way as well. Once you understand how the exact workflow works, you can run the exact setup locally or in Docker or any other platform as well. Okay, so I know I've been talking for a long time. Let's go into our Firebase Studio. Okay, so you can access Firebase Studio. I mean, if you want to do this thing manually, you can basically go through Firebase Studio, like go through the console and then put in rules, creating the database, doing the hosting, doing all that. So like you can go through the backend and do that. I'm just using a UI here where you can basically just prompt it and then get a response. Especially if you are like a vibe coder, you're not someone who's used to coding, like you don't really want to write code or set up rules or do anything manually. I think that this is a good way for you to get started. So inside this prompt box, again, to get to Firebase Studio is really studio.firebase.google.com. And so I'm going to use this exact prompt. So I'm just saying that, can you generate an AI flyer generator where the user generates the product image and gets back a fully designed flyer? The initial form collects the product name, the benefits, the brand name, target audience, along with the image, and the backend automation will be in n8n. So I'm just going to say prototype with AI, and this is going to like sort of generate the whole script for us. You don't have to like write a single line of code, guys. It's going to generate everything for you. Before it starts, the thing about Firebase Studio is that it gives you like the layout, like how it's gonna look like, and it also gives you like style guidelines, and it gives you the stack it's gonna use, and you'd see that it will generate all the files we need and everything. One advice about when you're vibe coding is you should make sure that you're testing everything you do as well. So once this is done generating, you're going to test it and see, oh, is this actually going to be calling like n8n and all that? If it doesn't call n8n, it will come in and like update this prompt to do more things for us as well. Okay, so as you can see, our flyer AI application has been generated for us. It's asking for a Gemini key. I'm going to put in a Gemini key, but we want to make sure that this can connect to our webhook, okay? As it stands now, I don't think it's connected to our webhook. So what we're going to do here is, up until now, it hasn't given us, like, we don't know the webhook URL is using and all that. So if I should switch into code mode and I want to see like where the webhook URL is and everything, and let's see what we get. So as you can see, the webhook URL has now been added. If I go into the env file here, you see that now we have our webhook URL here for us. Once you put in the webhook URL and the env environment has been updated, there should now be some sort of communication established. So once you go into the application, you upload your images and everything, should be able to communicate directly with your AI automation inside n8n. But yeah, that is it for today's tutorial. If you enjoyed this tutorial, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Leave your comments in the comment section below. Like I mentioned, I do have like a similar tutorial where I generated like an AI interior room designer SaaS application using n8n and TinyHost. If you're interested in watching that tutorial as well, then you can, I'm going to leave it on the screen so that you can check it out. If you want to get access to the templates, then you can also go to my school community to have access to the templates. But yeah, that is it, guys. That is it for today's tutorial. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one.